And not only they are gone, they have moved all the way to the back. So I don't know if it was getting a little warm up here or not, but oh, there they come. Welcome. You're welcome. We're glad to have you. I want to do it quickly for you to focus on the items of the day. There will be 3 talks, and if you had to notice, I am unfortunately capable of talking for long periods of time without breathing. So, I don't want to infringe upon the time of the event, so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go into teacher mode, which means I'm going to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. And that requires you, if you want to get anything from it, to focus. But we are going to be talking about some things that are going to require you to do just that, because it's probably not information that you've been exposed to directly. You will have heard some of the terms and some of the propositions that I give to you, but you will not hear them in the perspective that I'm going to deliver them. So it would be helpful for you to concentrate. The second item, I did not see very many questions in the box this morning. Now, I know you're meeting new people and you're having fun and all that stuff, but if you want to be treated like you got some sense, then you have to respond sometimes like you got some sense. I gave you the opportunity to contemplate something that's important to you biblically and to ask a question. Now, maybe you don't have any questions. Maybe you're the brightest bunch in the world and you've got it all figured out. And if that's the case, I'll sit down and you get up here. But if you want to know something, I am here to give it a stab. I don't claim to know everything, but I'll certainly give it an honest shot from a biblical perspective. So please, before the evening session, get your questions and your answers, because I ask you 3 questions that I need to know the answer. I put together my own little personal database, excuse me, so that I know how to respond to my audiences. And if you're not helping me, then you're not getting the quality that I think you deserve. So please, if you haven't done those cards, and I know there's plenty more, chances are you might have folded up a couple of them and flew them as airplanes last night. I don't know. But there's some more blank ones back on the table, and I encourage you to pick one up and write down the question. The 2 sessions this morning may help you to formulate your thoughts. I'm concerned that the size of the screen is not correct. There, we're getting close. Yeah, if you'd go that way, please. Go ahead and push. There you go. Just push that. That'll be good. Excellent. All right, let's begin. I got 45 minutes, and I'm going to go fast. I know that some of the adults last night were getting nervous because I went a little longer, so... No, I want to respect your time. So it's my responsibility to put this together, but you're going to have to pay attention. We are this morning going to talk about what is your worldview. And initially, you may not even know or recognize that term. But a worldview is a set of fundamental beliefs through which we view our origin, our destiny, and our purpose. Our origin, our destiny, and our purpose. These are fundamental beliefs, core beliefs. It's what we believe to be true about the world around us. Now, what we believe may be true, it may be partially true, it may be entirely false. That doesn't mean you still don't believe it, but it can be totally false. Given that, also we recognize that we consciously or subconsciously are aware of it, and that we consistently or inconsistently carry it out. Those are all aspects of what a worldview is. Now, we might say that it's a set of hinges on which our everyday thinking and doings turn. When we wake up in the morning and we go through our day, We don't academically think about some of these critical issues that we might see on the news or run into in school policy or something like that. We just react. We are reacting based upon what we have already embedded in our mind as to be true. But there again, we may carry it out inconsistently or consistently. It may be partially true or entirely false or entirely true. But it doesn't change the fact that within our own mind, it is what we believe to be true. Many cannot articulate their worldview because they don't think about it. If you were in a social studies class of mine, and I'd say you got 20 minutes to articulate in 2 paragraphs, 5 sentences each paragraph, your worldview, I think you'd be staring at the wall for a while. Because we're just not asked those kinds of things. But the reality is that in that, everyone has a worldview. You've got one, whether you're conscious of the details of it or not. There again, with that, we're going to examine the big 3. There are 3 primary worldviews that we engage every day. One has to do with the idea that there's only the universe, matter. There's one that says there's only God. And there's one that says, yes, there is matter and God. Those are the 3 fundamental core views. And in the course of our lifetime, we are exposed to what those views are and what they mean by varying sources. Your parents, television, school, your neighbor, all of those are constantly putting in input into our brain in the things that we engage in every single day. Now, some of those sources we trust more than others. And as I spoke to you last night, we are in the era of post-truth, which makes it even more difficult because we've come to accept the idea that really it's okay to put frivolous stuff out there and propose it to be truth. And if you lack the skill of discernment, you may fall prey to it. So with that in mind, which one is your view? That's what I want you to investigate. As I explain and expose these views, I want you to be conscious enough to say, well, which one is mine? You may find yourself in a conglomeration of them. You might have pieces of each one of them. But I'm going to explain each one of them to you, and then from there build on it till we gather this evening with kind of the climax of this particular series. So let's take a look. What do we know to be true? We know, one, we're born. Most people don't argue that question. We're born. And as a result, we live. You know, some live differently than others, but we do live. But the third point, again, universally accepted, we die. So at least we have a frame of reference to start from. You're born, you live, and you die. No matter which of the worldviews that you might attach yourself to, these fundamental truths are accepted by all 3. The real question is, what happens then? It's kind of like the rest of the story. Let's take a look. Well, it depends. What happens to you when you die depends. Depends on what? It depends on how you think you got here. However you perceive how you came to be really dictates what you think is going to happen when you die. Let me illustrate it for you. Well, fundamentally, we have 2 positions, creation and evolution. You're not unfamiliar with those terms. You probably are more familiar, at least on the notion of creationism, simply because of your participation within a religious body. Your counterparts, people you go to school with, may be aware of the term, but they will probably be aware of it in a negative sense. But nonetheless, let's explore this idea of what happens when I die based upon my origin. So, creation versus evolution. And then, fundamentally, something happens or nothing happens. That's it. Something happens or nothing happens. Now think about that in the way you live your life. If you believe nothing happens after you die, will that influence the way you live? What do you think? It will. If you think something's going to happen after you die, will that equally, potentially, affect the way you live? Given that, I'm not bound by any force except the force of nature. That's if I believe nothing happens. If nothing happens, then the only thing that guides my life is the force of nature. Because when I die, I die. However, if I believe that there's something, then I'm bound by the force that created me. Those are the two positions. There aren't any others. Either I'm bound by he, she, it, however I perceive it, that created me. And by the way, if I am created, does the Creator have the right to tell me what to do? Because I know that's not a term you like to hear. Actually, no human being does. You're going to tell me what to do? How many times have you said that? I know you never said it to your parents directly. You said it under your breath, but that's okay. That was for safety purposes. But that's the reality, right? If you've built things before, painted things before, drawn things before. What happens if you built a little go-kart, or if you built something, maybe you built a computer, and suddenly the computer stood up and says, I don't like what you made me, and I want to be a trash can. You would pick up that computer and say, rather than be a trash can, I will put you in one. Because you created it, right? So therefore you have the right to tell it what to do. Now, when we say something like that, tell it what to do, we think of an authoritarian, totalitarian, dictatorial mom and dad. But in reality, all their life they're telling you what? It's for your own good. We have some trouble believing that, don't we? Of course we do. Of course we do. Because we can't see past our 13th birthday. We can't see down the road. You don't know what it means to pay taxes. You don't know what it means for them to pay property taxes. Let me give you an inspiration to look. You may go on, get married, and not have children, but you'll still have to pay for the education of others. Interesting. Nonetheless, I'm bound by the force that created me. All right. Having said that, consider this. Worldview, based upon my origin, something or nothing, determines my destiny. What do you mean? Well, if it's something, if I was created by something, meaning some sort of a big bang, some sort of a random event, then all I can hope for in my destiny is to be buried in the ground. I'm going to go in the dirt, done. On the other hand, as it was, if I recognize some form of a creator, then as a result of that, the difference is my purpose in life is about now. Go for the gusto. You only go around once. What's the Nike one? Just do it. You know? Those are all sayings that are connected with this idea. If I was a product of a random molecular event, then the only purpose of my life is right now. Right now. And that's the fact. Versus the idea that if I believe in a creator, my purpose of life is about later. The difference between my purpose in life and of life. It's just a little preposition, but it does make a significant difference in your outcome. So, having explored the parameters, let's look at the individual positions as well. Let's say that I believe in only the universe, that is matter. That all that is real in my worldview is matter. History is a linear stream of events linked by cause and effect. This happens, which causes what? That happens, right? He pushes the button, the missile comes over, then I push the button, and the missile goes back over, right? I say, I love you. She says, I love you. You know, all that kind of stuff. Maybe she says, get out of here. I don't know. But the reality is, it's linked by cause and effect. But man was certainly not the goal of evolution, which evidently has what? You must understand this at the core. Evolutionists, although they don't talk a lot about it, I'll bet you they don't ever say it in the classroom very much or even hint at it. But if you extrapolate and take the theory of evolution to its end, because its creation was random, purpose has no place in its thought process. There's no purpose to life. There is none. Because we started with what? Random chance. Chance does not produce purpose. Given that, naturalism is a tag. Oh, can I say that? Hashtag. I don't get to do that much, but so I thought I'd throw that in there. But the idea is that the tag, if you will, for evolution has now become naturalism. It's a progressionary philosophical discussion. The gentleman that's pictured there is Charles Darwin. What does naturalism stand for, really? Matter exists, and all there is, God does not. I want you to understand that. In the evolutionary process, in the naturalism thesis, God does not exist. That means that what we're doing here this weekend is, in their eyes, foolish at best, idiotic at best, dangerous at worst. And I'll show you why. It also contends that human beings are complex machines. Personality is an interrelation of chemicals and physical property. Now, these quotes that I'm getting are not quotes that I made up. They are quotes that I took from evolutionary papers. We are a complex machine. A machine. Okay? Machines don't have what? Feelings. Nothing more than feelings. We're a machine, right? And how did we come? We are a compilation of what? Chemicals and physical properties. That's how we came to be. Ethics, you're going to have to help me. What's ethics? We need to know what this word means. Ethics. What's ethics? I'm sorry? Yes, we're halfway home. Ethics. It is a code to live by. Okay, moral, the term moral is a synonym. Right and wrong. Your code, if you will, of right and wrong. That's what ethics are. But I want you to see if you can pick up on the contradiction. He says ethics is related only to human beings, meaning that what? It doesn't apply to lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. So, how does that work? Why does it not apply to lions and tigers and bears? Because what do lions and tigers and bears do to each other? They steal each other's food, steal each other's woman, you know, they just do that all the time. And that's, at least at this point, we still deem that what? Inappropriate among the human species, see? So we have decided in the evolutionary model that ethics, because we recognize it exists, the evolutionist says, yes, it's pretty hard to deny that for some reason we seem to have a code of right and wrong, but it has to only apply to us because nowhere else in the evolutionary model does it exist. Don't you think that's odd? That if evolution was true as a process, how come you get to say that it only works for humans and not for the rest of the species? Interesting. Because what? How did we start? Accident. If it started by an accident, then nothing in the process has any rhyme or reason. Likewise, survival is thus basic, but it is human survival that is affirmed as primacy or primary. That means what? That's us, man. We got to survive. What gives you the right to survive more than the chicken? in the evolutionary process, shouldn't everybody be equal? What? Because it's obvious that what? We're supposed to be the smartest and all that kind of stuff. Finally, death is the extinction of personality and individuality. That's their definition of death. It extinguishes personality and individuality. That's all that happens when you die. Your personality and your individuality ceases to be in the human species. Can you create personality and individuality in a test tube? You know, 2 atoms of boron, let's throw one in of magnesium, a little bit of oxygen. Stir up some chemical covalent bonding. And voila, you have faithfulness. It doesn't work that way, does it? But that's fundamentally a problem with evolution. There is no why, and that's critical. When you're talking to an evolutionist, when you're talking to a naturalist, you must understand they cannot explain why. They have their proposition of the how. How did we come to be? Well, currently the explanation is that in a massive matter that weighed approximately about 25 pounds, all of the matter of the universe was contained within that, and at some moment in the very, very distant past, it blew up. Well, why did it happen? We don't have a clue. And you need to remember that. You mean to remind... Because let me ask you this question. Does it seem to you, even in your short lives thus far, does it seem to you that life does indeed have a purpose? Just internally, does it seem that there is a purpose in life? Nothing. That's the conclusion. Natural selection, the process whereby organisms better adapt to their environment and tend to survive and produce more offspring. The theory of its action was first fully expounded by Charles Darwin and is now believed, catch this, to be the main process that brings about evolution. Natural selection, also known as survival of the... So you guys with puny muscles are in big trouble. Better get to the gym. So, Darwin, however, rejected the idea of objective moral standards. Why? If you're an honest scientist, you have to do what Darwin did. He rejected the if something is objective, what does that mean? What? Okay, compare it to subjective. What? Okay, there is some agreed upon standard that's outside of the body that is considering a standard. Okay? So, an objective for what's our objective standard of morals? I don't say our because I don't know you. Just as a general, what is religious Protestantism's objective moral standard? I'll try again. A moral standard is what? Things to do with right and wrong. Okay? A moral standard is the standard by which we determine what is. So, in the religious Protestant world, what do we use as the moral objective standard? The Bible. Thou shalt not. And if you get time, try this. The idea is that we have an objective standard. I didn't write it, you didn't write it, but we hold it up and say this is the definition of right and wrong. Darwin said we have to throw that out because we've already explored the fact that he said that God he doesn't exist. So we can't have that. But he does recognize a sense of subjective moral behavior. Okay? As far as I can tell, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem to him to be the best ones. Do you see a problem with that? The rule for his life as far as I can tell, is to follow the impulses and instincts. So if you've got an attractive young woman walking down the halls of your school, and for some crazy reason you just wanted to kiss her, and it was your instinct, you have the right to do it under Darwin's proposition. You sure do. You sure do, because it's what? What seems to him to be best. Now, those that hold and maintain an objective moral standard says what? That wouldn't be, that's not the plan, dude. You better not do that. You get a lot of trouble. Besides, she's got a mean right hook. That's right. It applies across the board. I've often said if I didn't have a worldview that said that the Bible was my moral standard, I would be a bank robber. And I'd be a good one. Didn't see much purpose in working my whole life when I could work 1-2 days a year and steal it from all of you. But I don't do that because there is, in my mind, an objective moral standard. Do you see how clear the distinction is between the two worlds? All right, then. Here's an interesting, this is a study. I got this out of The Atlantic. It's a very well-known magazine publication of science in the science section of The Atlantic magazine. The name of the article was Unusual Murderous Mammals, Typical Murderous Primates. This was a study. People paid lots of money, and this goes on all the time that you're unaware of. That a new study looks at the rate of lethal violence across 1,000 species. 1,000. They studied 1,000 species to understand the evolutionary origins of humanity's own inhumanity. That's unbelievable. They even use those terminologies in the same sentence. Here are some of the results. They studied animals that were prone to kill their own. And of course, the conclusion is what? Why do they kill their own? Why do they kill their own? Huh? For what? Food? What? Survival of the fittest. Hey, you got some nice looking papyrus or lamb chops. I got up late today, so I think I'll take yours. We don't accept that behavior, do we? If we have a moral standard. But we're studying that. And what's going to be the ultimate conclusion of that? Right there. How many times in classrooms have you heard, well, Hitler was a monster? Yeah. How about Tito, Mussolini, Idi Amin, Mao Zedong? They're not. They are not. You cannot call them monsters. You can't. If you believe in evolution, you cannot call them monsters, because all Hitler was trying to do was to what? He thought he was, and the Aryan race was, the best. He believed it. Read the book he wrote in prison, Mein Kampf. He believed it because he believed in evolution. He believed that tough guy wins. He just didn't plan it all out. He made some mistakes. This is important to understand in our society. This is a publication I got, World's Deadliest Animals. What do we consider to be on this chart? Huh? Second what? Animal. We are no more than an animal. Mosquitoes, by the way, are the worst in the world. They kill more people than anything. Mostly through malaria, which I have some first-hand experience with. Yeah, it's bad, but we're an animal. We're an animal. Interesting. The logic of natural selection. Okay? Hold on to your hats. 42%, they should be in your lap, by the way. 42% of yearly deaths in the world are from abortion. And I'm not saying that death of any kind is a good idea. But when we tout the things that we tout, how many people were shot by guns every year? 42% of all deaths in the world are from abortion. Because why? In the evolutionary model, we view those to be born differently. They're just a product of the process, and if they're inconvenient to our lifestyle or for whatever reason, we eliminate them. And we don't have a bad conscience about them because it's just a part of the process, and we're just an animal. Here's one for you. 21% of all U.S. pregnancies excluding miscarriages, end in abortion. 1 in 4 almost. But don't get your tissues out. Remember, they're teaching in science class that we're just evolution. When you die, you die. It's no big deal. What's the problem? That's the only way you can swallow that. It's disgustingly disgusting. And the only way you can swallow that is they sell it to you by telling you and emphasizing the idea of evolution, so that when you get old enough to have a child, you've already been pumped full of that stuff, and when you go to the doctor and it's inconvenient for you to have a child at that moment in time, you will end it. And not have a real bad conscience about it, because you've been pre-programmed to already accept it. There is within the evolutionary community great division. Huxley, by the way, Mr. Huxley is very much historically a part of the educational development in our own country. A philosopher. If you go to into teaching, which I don't recommend you to do that, as one who's been there, and I have some serious reasons why I wouldn't want to encourage you to do that. But Thomas Huxley helped formulate the philosophy of some aspects of education. Robert Wright is a major player. The book at the top is Straw Dogs by a professor at Oxford University named John Gray. Now, let me show you the illustration of the two distinctions within evolution, because here's a problem for them. It's pretty hard to say, really, there's no morality. It's pretty hard to deny that. See? But it opens the can. If there is morality, then who gets to decide what the code is? And that creates what? Another problem. If it's self-determining, then I can determine whatever I want to do. And that won't work. You can't run a government, you can't run a country like that. There has to be some sort of an objective standard, or it comes apart. Criminal behavior. How many of you know Criminal Minds, the television show Criminal Minds? That's one of the few programs I watch. I don't have cable. I don't have any of the thousands. I have Netflix. I barely know how to run that thing. But I watch Criminal Minds. But if you're familiar with that show, 9 times out of 10, they make excuses for the perpetrator. In their profiles, they say, oh, he grew up in this kind of family. He was exposed to this kind of trauma. He has this genetically inclination towards violence. In almost all of them, they give them an excuse. Because we actually study that now. We study the chromosomes. Here was a posting, as you could tell from the Facebook thing. A writer writes in, I honestly don't know what I would do if I were pregnant with a kid with Down syndrome. Real ethical dilemma. Well, I didn't say there wouldn't be a dilemma, but for someone who adheres to the moral biblical standard, there's no ethical dilemma. It's a dilemma, and I need to be on my knees about how I'm going to deal with it, but we're certainly not going to call it quits. Richard Dawkins, he's one of the most outspoken, well-traveled. He debates all over the world with various people, not just Christians, but Muslims and Hindus, about this issue. He says, abort it and try again. Put your quarter in the machine and give her another spin. It would be, now here's the problem. it would be immoral to bring it into the world. To bring what into the world? It. If you have the choice. What do you mean immoral? Richard, we came here by chance. There's nothing moral or immoral about it. You see, it's a conflict. Now, the honest evolution, which I have met a couple, recognize some facts. Biological theories, okay, are determined by factors largely beyond the individual's control. That's where we get that criminal mind stuff. Even the television shows are preparing you for it. You don't even know it. They're preparing you to think that way. Ultimately, it's not his fault, her fault, because it's genetics and it's beyond their control. I'm telling you stuff that's going on in our court systems. They are bringing experts in to try and excuse these behaviors. So, no right or wrong. When you're dead, you're dead. That affects the way you behave. Here's what Dawkins said. The best thing to do is to let Christianity die a natural death. When understanding of the universe has become widespread, the masses will know just how absurd the Christian doctrine is. Now, Mr. Dawkins has a lot of letters after his name. He has a PhD and a bunch of stuff. And so he's well respected in the academic community. He is not the only one that thinks this way. He's not militant towards us. As you can see, he's what? We'll wait him out. We'll die out. What we're doing this weekend to Richard Dawkins, very prominent person, very influential, is absurd. It's just absurd. But he's willing to wait. But that's not what Mr. Gray says. Dawkins is not being honest. He said modern humanism is the faith. Did you catch that? It is the faith, meaning it what? It's a belief system. It's their worldview that through science, mankind can now know the truth and so be free. But if Darwin's theory of natural selection is true, this is impossible. What is impossible? You can't be free because you never were in chains. You're just a product of chance. The human mind serves evolutionary success, not truth. Truth is not a term you can plug into the concept of evolution. It doesn't exist because truth is something that is what? Right, wrong. It's connected in some way. To think otherwise is to resurrect the pre-Darwinian era, that's our theory, that humans are different from other animals. We believe that's true because what? God created us different. The Bible explores that. He gave us dominion over the animals. He gave them bodies and souls, but he didn't give them a spirit. And we have a spirit that God will one day call back. Mr. Gray recognizes the fact that even though we are in a better position than some of the animals, we are by no means special. You can't claim that you're special. We're not over the other animals. We're just farther down the evolutionary chain. And that's significant. So, given all of that, let's take a look at view number 2. When did I start? What? Okay, good. All right, view 2. So the first one is what? The first worldview says that the universe is all there is. Matter is only, but they can't explain what? What cannot that theory explain? What? Why? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? Let's look at the second one. The second one says there's only God. Now, you're probably not as familiar with this one until you get to university. But it's been in this country probably since the 60s is when it became very popular. You'll recognize it as we go along. Let's look at some of these statements. God is the one infinite, impersonal. Did you get that? Impersonal, meaning what? Not personal. That's brilliant. Impersonal. What? If somebody is personable toward you, what do you mean that to be? Tell me what you think it means. If I'm going to be impersonal, I'm going to be personable to you. What does that mean? Not, but I want to be personable. That guy is personable. What's your first name again? Tyler. If I said Tyler is personable, what do I mean? He's friendly. He'll talk to you, right? He's interested about things that you do or don't do, okay? That's personable. In this model, the universe versus the God model, that the God in this model is impersonable. Now, in the model that those that might follow the Bible, is God personable or impersonable? He's very personable. How personable? How personable? We got to tell them adults to be quiet. You know, they're just stealing the show over there, raising their hand. They don't even raise their hand. We know better than that, don't we? We always raise our hand when we answer questions. Golly. There you go, dear.
Would you say that mercy being aspect of God?
It's an attribute, certainly, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're personable. In other words, a judge can give mercy to you, right? But he may not know you. He may have, as a matter of fact, he may never have had any contact with you whatsoever. It's a strong characteristic. Go. Yes, ma'am?
So then, that he looks into our hearts then and knows exactly who we are?
Okay, now, to be personable, it requires interaction. That's his ability, another character trait that he has, to be a part of us, but he can do that without our participation. Yes?
Do you think sending his son?
You got it. In the Old Testament, it's difficult because God was doing things like from up there, right? A couple of lightning bolts every once in a while, you know? Open up the ground, swallow a bunch of people. Nah, you know, no different. Burning bush was close, right? You know, that a little closer. But definitely the ultimate concept of God's personal nature with us is that he came down here and lived with us. As the scripture says, he became one of us. That's the greatest testimony. In this model, that doesn't happen. Reality is that God is the cosmos. Oh, interesting. Tell me more. If anything that is not God appears to exist, it is Maya, illusion, and does not truly exist. In other words, anything that exists as a separate and distinct object is an illusion. This is an illusion. It's not really here. I went to a university open forum with my brother-in-law once, and we traveled quite a distance to go to it because we lived out in the country, and so I don't know if he was a little crabby or not by the time we got there. But we got in there, and these three professors were sitting up there, and they were talking about humanism. And one of them said, you know, in reality, as we talk about this subject, you see that chair over there? We can't really be sure that that chair is here. And my brother-in-law, who at the time was quite clear in his position, he says, excuse me, sir, if I walk over there and pick up that chair and bust you upside the head, you'll know it's here. But this is a philosophy in this particular view, that what is God is everything in the universe. If it seems to be in some way inanimate, it's probably not even really there. And I know you're going, who in the world ever thought of that thing up? Well, you're going to be surprised. Let's see what else we have to say. Buddhism includes an enormous range of diversity in belief and practice. Learning that someone is a Buddhist does not tell you about that person's belief. They are the most difficult group that I've ever tried to encounter to evangelize because they won't fight with you. I've traveled around the world, and I went through airports in the day where we had the Hare Krishnas. Those are the guys in the orange suits that walk around the airport playing tambourines. And you try to talk to them about what they believe, and because why? It's whatever you want it to be. How can you... You say you're a Christian. Oh, very good. You can be a Christian. You will make it too. Just not as fast as me. So, consider. What is human being? What is a human being in this scenario? That is, what is at the very core of each of us? Each person is the whole shooting match. Each person is, to be put it boldly but accurately in Eastern terms, God. We are not separate entities. We are all a part of the entire cosmos. You're God, you're God, you're God, I'm God, we're all God. What's that name? Kurt Cobain? Or what's his name? What's his name? Kurt Cobain. Anybody know him? He does. Well, he does too. Lead singer in Nirvana. Nirvana is a term that represents what all Hindus and Buddhists are trying to reach. Oneness with the universe. Okay? I don't think Kirk made it. He killed himself. A little older. Nonetheless, given this, in Hinduism, they have well over 350,000 gods or deities. Yeah. But generally, the present trend is that most of the Hindus believe and worship many gods simultaneously. Meaning what? Simultaneously. What's that mean? Same time. In the hope of receiving a blessing from many of them. Basically, they're playing their odds. Yeah. Hey, man, if I worship 20 of them at a time, I'm bound to get something good. One of them's going to cash in. Right? Sometimes this may even create confusion in their minds on whom to worship at a given situation. Because if you study each of the deities, they all have different purposes and functions. And sometimes the function of one is actually in the opposition of another. And that, of course, creates deity. However, most of them resolve these problems how? In their own way. That becomes the central part of this religious philosophy. It's what you want it to be. Given, there are many paths. That's what they'll tell you. There are many paths, my son. You've seen movies. How many of you ever seen Kung Fu? The old Kung Fu. David Carradine. Yes, Wild West, walk around. Yeah, he's smiling. Yeah, I've seen that, you know, and he'd beat up a bunch of guys, and then he'd say some Confucius saying, you know, if you're going to punch one of them, punch all of them. I don't know what the deal was. But many paths, the idea of many paths is central to this. So the naturalist position is what? There are no paths. There are no paths. You're just going to die. This position holds that there are many paths. I want to introduce this to you. These are principles you may have seen in philosophy classes, if you've taken any debating classes or logic classes, and even in science, these are prevalent. And I'll be coming back to them from time to time. There are these two principles. The law of non-contradiction means that something cannot be both true and false at the same time. And you would say, well, of course, duh. Well, it's not so obvious. And we'll see some examples. The second is the law of the exclusion of the middle. Something either is or it's not. Is it an illusion? Or is it here? Those are principles that are universally accepted as principles in the discovery of truth. And we're going to come back to them. Orientation. This is getting to oneness with the one is not a matter of finding the one true path. Do you understand? Because the object in this idea, you're God, you're God, you're God, you're God, the object is for all of God to get back together someday in nirvana. We'll talk a little bit about how that's done in a minute. But that's the objective. So you can have your path, you can have your path, and you can have your path, but we'll all end up in the same spot where the one becomes the one. Now, here's where you'll probably connect to this theory. Orientation is not so much a matter of doctrine, the teachings. That's not where you really get to it. It's in, as it was, a technique. Now, what's a technique? What? How you do something. So, football, you got rules, right? Got plays, right? But what do coaches work on a lot? Technique. You can have all the brains you want, but if you don't know how to do a forearm lift, what good's it going to do you on the front line? If you don't understand how to stand, try to block somebody with your feet together. Boom. That won't last very long, right? Try to tackle somebody with just your arms that weighs 270 pounds, right? You have to learn the technique. This theology does exactly that. Of all the paths, one of the most common, especially with Western practitioners, involves chanting the word Om. Now, we say that, and sometimes we giggle, and we use it in a funny way. But you must understand, in this philosophy, that is central to their belief. That would be the equivalent of the Lord's Supper. Why is that? Because when you do yoga, you sit. The object is to empty your brain. Empty it. To become one with the universe. And the longer you practice this, hours, the emptier your brain gets. Now, how are you going to get it empty? Om. You repeat that for 10 minutes, you go nuts. Try it for 3 hours, you go blank. In Oregon in the 80s, a Rajneesh came to Oregon, bought up a bunch of territory and land, called a place called Antelope, Oregon. Bought the whole town. And lo and behold, all those people just loved that. Rich people all over America came and wrote checks, big checks to this guy, this Rajneesh. And they sat around every day for a period of time, cross-legged. And when their brain was absolutely empty, they went berserk. Jumping around, taking their clothes off, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. On the way to oneness. So in the university system and in your local town, I know I've been down to the coffee shop with my hosts. And all over the wall are these little advertisements. Come to yoga weekend. Now you think that's, it's good for health and all that stuff. But you must understand, these people say many paths to what? They don't have to tell you what you're doing. They just can get you on the floor going, oh. And then what's really powerful about that is at the right moment, they can begin to suggest things, and your brain is now empty. Yeah, actually, militaries have been using the technique for centuries. So, moreover, the concept of karma, you've heard of karma? Universal thought, former existence, all of those things. To realize one's oneness is to go beyond knowledge. Meaning what? You don't need it. To go beyond good and evil. You don't need it. But then I get to the issue of my former existence. The mainstay of Eastern mysticism is reincarnation. According to this philosophy, every one of you had a previous life, or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20, not quite sure. None of which you can remember, can you? Find that interesting. But you're involved in this particular endless cycle. Death, birth, and rebirth. So, in these pictures, Everything is about karma. And your karma right now is a result of your ability to do your ohms and get closer to the oneness. So quickly, review. The priority in the system, you'll have to suffer later. If you do a bad thing, you'll have to suffer later. So there's no agape love, there's no giving love, nor would any such love benefit the recipient. One does good deeds in order to attain unity with the one. If you do good deeds in life, when you're born again the next time, you get to the next tier. Until hopefully you can get to the oneness. But nobody tells you how many times you're going to do that. You just keep doing it. But the point is that the real reason that you do good deeds is purely 100% selfish. You're not doing it for the good of the other person. You are doing it solely for your own benefit. And that's absolutely contradictory to the biblical format. We do what we do always for others because that's what Christ did. Next time we'll look at the third view. Thank you.